going on, networkers? Got a lot of questions, got a lot to do, so let's open up the mailbag. Let's do this. Here's my opinion on the Marlins trade, and it's just bad for baseball. Completely bad for baseball. I know Bud Selig wants to talk about the minor leaguers that went to the Marlins, and they're good minor league prospects and whatnot, but it's just bad for the game. This is a team last year, the Florida being the Miami Marlins, that built a new stadium, took a lot of money out of the city, has a history of dumping players, talked about how they were going to be different, new mindset. They go out and sign Jose Reyes to this monster contract, Mark Burley to this monster contract. They get Heath Bell to this big, ginormous contract. They already had Hanley Ramirez under contract. So you're starting to think maybe the Marlins are turning a corner, and 1 year later, they dump everybody and go back to their old ways. I don't care that they want to talk about, oh, well, we got some talented young. No. They should have been stuck with what they signed. Okay? When you go out and spend all this money, a boatload of money on these players, all right, and you got a new facility, and you're trying to turn over a new leaf in Florida and try to make yourself look presentable as an organization, you should not be allowed to get away with making this trade. This is just bad for the game of baseball. And you know what really hurts is it kills the Tampa Bay Rays their ability to get a new facility. No one in Florida is going to pay for a new ballpark for either the Rays for the Rays because of what the Marlins did. No one. So the backlash not only looks bad on the Florida Marlins part, and Loria looks like a complete buffoon, a complete idiot, and Major League owners should want him out of the game. Bud Selig should be pushing to get him out of the game, okay? But not only does it look bad for the Marlins, but it destroys the Rays, an organization that sorely needs a new facility because their ballpark is in shambles. Okay, but there's no fan support in Florida or in Tampa Bay or in Miami to give them a new facility. It's just not enough. They're not drawing enough fans, even for playoff games, even though they're putting a good product on the field. They're not drawing enough fans. The money's not there within the organization, so they have to look outside. And there's no way the city of Tampa Bay, and St. Pete, is going to give money to the Rays in order to build them a new ballpark after just seeing what happened with the Marlins, where they took so much money, built this state-of-the-art facility, signed all these players, then decided to do a salary dump. Because let's call it what it is. It was a salary dump. Get rid of all these top-flight players that they signed for basically a bunch of AAA players they're going to trot on the field. And if I'm a Miami Marlins fan, there's no way on earth I'm going out to watch this ball camp. No chance. I'm going to make the Marlins miserable. That ballpark would be empty. The fans should pull out a protest for opening day and not show up. And I feel bad for players like Giancarlo Stanton, Logan Morrison. These are guys who have been there a while. They're good players. And if I'm Stanton, there's no chance I sign an extension. I'm out of it. I would have demanded a trade immediately. Immediately. I want nothing to do with this organization. And if they don't trade me, I'm not showing up for spring training. He can go play in the Dominican. He can go play in Venezuela. He can go play overseas somewhere, make a nice amount of money, play well, not hurt his stock whatsoever as a ball player, and call it a day. And basically hand tie the Marlins saying, you know what, I'm too good for this organization. Either trade me or I'm not playing. Because basically what they did was they decided to get rid of all the players that they had that were worth, one were a major league talented already, two worth something salary-wise. Okay, they got rid of all of that. They broke all promises with the players that were already within the organization who were committed to winning and hoping that the organization, once they got a new ballpark, was committed to winning. It's a complete mess. Complete mess. And I have a serious problem with Major League Baseball, and I have a serious problem with Loria, the owner of the Marlins, talking about how this organization, meaning the Marlins, got a good deal out of this trade, that they got good minor league players. I don't want to hear it. I think it's asinine. I think it's a stupid cop-out. I do not buy it. And I think the Marlins owe not only the city of Florida a lot, Miami, excuse me. Not only do they owe them a lot, but they owe Major League Baseball a lot, because what they just did goes against all things that are right in the game of baseball. I have a huge problem with that trade. A huge problem. Well, with Dooley out now at Tennessee, and we've been kind of speculating this for quite a while, there's going to be a lot of names being thrown around for this coaching job opening. John Gruden is the number one choice, I think, for all fans. And there's a lot of rumors going around that he's actually putting out feelers to get back in the game. He has the connection to the University of Tennessee. His wife was a cheerleader there. He spent some time down there. He also was a graduate assistant in the early 90s at Tennessee. So there is connection to the university, and he likes it. And it's a state-of-the-art facility. Tennessee is still a top 20 job in the country. Overall, they just need to. They've hit a rough patch. They had the Lane Kiffin disaster. Dooley's, inherited a mess when he got there. They haven't really progressed. It's a deeper ball club. They have a lot of talent offensively, which I think has gone unnoticed by mainstream fans. But people who follow and watch, they know this offense is very talented. It's just, and it wasn't a great hire with Sal Sinceri. It was more like a square peg going in a round hole. This was a guy who tried to turn a 4-3 defense into a 3-4. It just hasn't worked. So Gruden's name is the number one choice there at Tennessee, and I think he'd be a good fit. There's a lot of other choices I think you got to look at. I think Jim Tressel, the former Ohio State coach, would be an excellent fit. This is a guy who's a proven winner. He knows how to recruit. He can turn a program around, and he can maintain success. I mean, there's no doubting his ability to coach when you look at his record at Ohio State. The only issue you have with Tressel is the overall NCAA violations that he had at the program, and what type of sanctions will be hit with your program when you hire him. There are some carryovers that will hit you for at least a year, I believe. So if he signed, and if you're the University of Tennessee, you need a guy. I think you can take a risk. Maybe you sit out 1 year. You take that. I'm not going to a bowl game year, but because you're going to let Tressel put his imprint on the program, build it up. And maybe going into year 2, then you start seeing success. Year 3, now you're back competitive, competing at the top of the country. So I think Tressel would be an excellent fit at the university, alongside Gruden being a good name. I like Art Briles at Baylor. Here's a guy who's had success everywhere he's gone. He turned Houston into a solid program, paved the way for Kevin Sumlin to take over and do an excellent job when Sumlin eventually went to Houston. He went to Baylor, and he's had a ton of success there at Baylor, especially the past 3 years. Discounting this year where they're 5-5, but it's in the middle of a rebuild. They did lose the Heisman Trophy winner and Robert Griffin III. And what he did with the Baylor program, he's also established. They're building a new facilities, expanding on what the facilities they have. He's turned that program into basically a legitimate Division I college football program, because before Baylor was seriously an afterthought. So Art Briles would be an excellent fit. This is a guy who's won everywhere he's went, competitive. He brings an interesting offense, a nice dynamic, and a lot of energy, and a guy who really will recruit. Remember, now he's got roots in the state of Texas. As a recruiter, and that's something you need when you recruit in the SEC. You've got to expand outside of your own state, especially outside of the state of Tennessee. So Briles would be a nice fit. I think he'd fit well there. I think those are my top 3 names. I know you throw out David Cutcliffe, who said he wants to stay at Duke. Charlie Strong at Louisville, who's done an excellent job. I think he'd be a nice fit as well. Dan Mullen at Mississippi State. Tennessee is looking for a guy with head coaching experience. I completely agree with them. This is not a situation to bring in a new guy or a guy who hasn't coached at this type of level, because the SEC is a different animal in itself. So I do like the ideas that they're throwing out there, but my top 3, I think, would be Art Briles, Jim Tressel, and John Gruden. Well, the suspension was just levied yesterday, and I fully expect Ed Reed to appeal this decision, because this has gotten a little bit out of control. Ed Reed is not a player running around headhunting. He's never been that way in his career. To suspend him for a complete game, I find is beyond harsh. Not only is Ray Anderson in the NFL hurting Ed Reed, they're also hurting the Baltimore Ravens, who are in the middle of a divisional run. They're playing really good football. This team has rallied around, their defensive leader and Ed Reed with Ray Lewis being out. They've really rallied together and performed pretty well on both sides of the ball since Ray Lewis's injury. I have a serious issue here with the NFL. And I understand they're trying to create player safety and make sure the NFL is as safe as possible. But it comes to a point where you can't hand-tie the players so much where there's nothing they can do on the field. Defensive players are at the biggest disadvantage under the NFL rules and now their new safety precautions than any other player on the field, especially defensive backs and linebackers. Especially them. Look, pass interference is called all the time. There's no hand checking after 5 yards. You can barely breathe on a wide receiver. Okay, and now you're talking about guys target maybe a little bit high. They're not targeting people on purpose. They're trying to make a play, an impact play. 1, to change the momentum of the game. 2, cause a turnover. Or 3, get an incompletion. That's it. And the way the NFL is trying to change the game now, there's nothing players can do anymore. You can call me old school. You can say, well, it's the way the game's going. Well, if this is the way the game is going, you might as well put pink tutus on everybody, or just cancel the game all into itself. We can play flag football then if that's the case. We can put little hankies on everybody's waist, let them run around, and we can pull flags. That way we don't have to spend money on helmets. You can see players' faces. You don't have to wear shoulder pads, and you don't have to wear leg pads because none of them wear them anyway, so you might as well just do it. That's the way the game is going at this point, and I have a real problem with the way the NFL is handling this. You can't just suspend a player, especially Ed Reed, and we can look. We've looked at that over and over, and I've watched it a couple. There is no malicious intent from Ed Reed on that play whatsoever. And sure, it's a little bit high, but it's not an egregious hit. It didn't knock the player out of the game. Emmanuel Sanders wasn't knocked out. Okay, it wasn't a helmet. He didn't knock his helmet off. Ed Reed hit him a little bit above the shoulders, tried to make a play, and that was it. This game, you're asking players to go 100 miles an hour. Okay, this is the most violent, most dangerous sport in all of sports. Okay, you're asking guys to go 100 miles an hour, make an impact play, but at the same time, don't hit too high. Think about where you're going to hit. As a guy who's played and a guy who's coached, at the younger level, you cannot tell a player to slow down. Because what you're doing, if you slow down, is you're risking injury upon yourself. You have to protect yourself. And these guys are going 100 miles an hour trying to make a play. If they slow down, let's just take, for instance, a runner is coming at you or a wide receiver is coming at you. And you go to make a play. You slow down because you don't want to hit him too high. And he runs you over. Now you're knocked out the game, but that's a solid play by him. How does that make sense? Well, you can say, well, why don't you just tackle a little bit lower? You know what? If you tackle somebody a little bit lower, let's say you aim for the knees, you could possibly end somebody's career by blowing out their ACL. Ask any player in the league. They would rather get hit in the head and risk maybe sitting out 2-3 games instead of getting hit in the knee and getting taken out for an entire season, if not more. There's an inherent risk when you play the game of football. It's what you sign up for. It's what we've all signed up for. You cannot take that away from the players. The violence in the game is what keeps the game clean. It's what protects the players that are playing. You can't just wrap everything up in a bubble. You've got to let the guys play. And sure, if there are guys going out there making ridiculous plays, launching themselves into defensive players at their head, fine. Suspend them, kick them out the league because that's not what we need. But if you got a guy going out there making a clean, solid football play, hits the guy a little bit high, let them play. It is what it is. There's another play in that game if you watch. Bernard Pollard, who's known as a hard hitter for the Ravens, and I want to say he's having a fantastic season. This guy has been great. Byron Leftwich takes off and runs down the sideline. Bernard Pollard could have absolutely lit him up. But it looked like Leftwich was going to step out of bounds. So avoiding the penalty and avoiding possibly getting suspended because Roger Goodell and his group of cronies have this, black cloud over the game. Instead of blowing Leftwich up, he pulls off, and Leftwich runs right by him down the sideline into the end zone for a touchdown. Now, that could have been a huge play in that game. Now, it didn't end up being very much because Pittsburgh's offense, after Leftwich hurt his ribs, didn't do very much afterwards. But that was a huge play, and that was an interesting moment because you're looking at a guy who has a history of blowing people up. Clean at that. And he just let the quarterback go by him because he didn't want to get a penalty. What Goodell and his group of cronies are doing to this game is unbelievable. And I tried to defend him as long as I could, but I no longer. I think Goodell has been the worst commissioner in sports outside of Gary Bettman, who was a complete travesty. David Stern is the best. Gary Bettman is the worst. And Roger Goodell is sitting in the same room as Gary Bettman. They're completely ruining the game of football. And in order for things to get better, they got to go back. They need to sit down and review what they're doing to this game because right now they're hurting it. And Ed Reed is paying for it because Goodell's cronies don't know exactly what they're doing. If we wanted doctors and lawyers to run the game, we would put flags around their waist. Okay, these guys would all have medical degrees. All right, and this game would be played on styrofoam and on pillows, and everything would be nice and soft, and things would be great. That's not the game of football. The game of football is violent. It's dangerous. There's a risk. You know this when you sign up when you're younger, and you know this when you're playing when you're older. People get bigger, they get faster, they get stronger. That's just the way the game is. We're all about player safety, but come on. Let's have an idea. Let's have a clue of what we're doing.